Hey, it's Chris. So, again, I love looking back and making comparisons on this channel. It's something in this hobby that nobody wants to do because it exposes the weaknesses. It exposes the fact that we are always hyping up things going forward. So, I said, okay, let's take a look back now a year, right? It sounds simple. It sounds easy. It sounds really just straightforward. At the same time, it also is a direct, okay, where are they now? Not ranking wise, but around me wise. Looking back a year ago, games I played as the first time, we're going to combine this into 2 months right now, October, November 2023. What games I played, how I feel about them now, do I still want to play them now? Are they even in my collection now? Or even if I talked about them on crowdfunding, like how we doing sense. So we're doing it. Now, I had about 30 games played, 30 different games played combined between the months of October and November 2023. That's pretty significant. And that's a fair number of games. And so the question is, how do you separate those out? Where are they? And so I'm going to hit on the biggest ones from them, let you know my thoughts a year from now, whether it's still in my collection, whether I want to get rid of it, whether I still want it in general, and how much, I want to play it more or not, right? Because you have those games. I was just filming a different video before this where I said, okay, Dominant Species Marine, right? Haven't played that in a hell of a long time. But I also kind of don't really want to get rid of it. So that's sometimes the differentiation we're talking about here as a whole. So best games I played, right? Best games I played looking back a year. I would say right now, of all the games I played a year ago, the best one for me personally, starting off with this, Cascadero from Bitewing Games. I have my copy. They delivered in under a year on crowdfunding. I freaking love that game. I am a Knizia lover as a whole of the tile laying variety. I've talked about Samurai, I've talked about Babylonia, I haven't really talked about Blue Lagoon, I've mentioned Tigris and Euphrates and Yellow and Yangtze. I own them all, right? I covered Rebirth from Mighty Boards earlier this year, but Cascadero is up there as a mix between Blue Lagoon and Babylonia for me. More approachable. I like the tracks on the side. Other people, are very divisive about it and are not meaningful enough. I like the twist on don't want to be the first around an area, want to be the second or third and get more points that way and link them all together and still in the same way, but having some randomness in the setup and the teardown. I enjoy that. It's a nice puzzle, not overly complex. Again, the rules are thin and the complexity on the board is deeper than what it would appear. So it easily stands the test of time for me. It's going to be a keeper. It's going to be in my top 50 of games of all time if I ever do that. Cascadito, it's okay. It's okay. I'm not as enamored with it. I think actually the more recent Cascadia roll-in rights actually better it for that aspect, even though I'm still not, in general speak, a huge fan of the roll-in right, roll-in draw, whatever, and blah, that sort of are incorporated off of other games in the first place. I think that's too potentially hit or miss because you're trying to make the other game fit that scheme of things, and that just doesn't always translate well. And so I think there's a little bit of that with this. It's not bad. My wife loves these roll and rights, so I also haven't gotten rid of it because she really just likes playing that type of game. That is easy to play, easy to understand, easy to get to the table, short time frame. So she loves them, so I haven't gotten rid of it, but I also wouldn't be necessarily enamored with keeping it either in that regard. My second most favorite game from that was on my top 10 list of last year, and Cascadero is kind of one of those weird ones, right? Like, do you talk about it in 2023's best because I actually played the final copy really essentially then, but now I got the final copy in 2024, so it should be on 2024's list. That's a dilemma for later year me. But the second best game was actually one of my best from last year. Was also Bitewing. It was actually Zoo Vadis, and Zoo Vadis, it's just sitting behind, I think, Dune Imperium up there, but it's an absolutely fantastic negotiating game with slight asymmetry animal powers where you can only use your powers to essentially help other people to get them to maybe benefit you later on or even immediately. And again, I didn't think this was going to work, and I don't have a lot of games that fall under this negotiation style of things, because truth be told, I don't have a good group of folks that enjoy that aspect, and my wife doesn't really either, and it doesn't play well with 2, which, you know, in theory, then all of those aspects should not make me like it as much as I do. It's a lovely freaking game. Again, that could be a top 30 game easily for me. I think ultimately, you know, just because it's that much different than anything else I have absolutely zero qualms about telling you that is going to be like similarly with Cascadero. Although with Cascadero, I mean, I can make the argument that I even might start preferring some of those others, so I can't tell you forever, but Zoo Vadis is a forever. I think Zoo Vadis is even higher ceiling than Cascadero, as surprising as that is, even though right now, currently, my ability to play Cascadero is going to trump Zoo Vadis. So that's still there. You know what? Let's stick with the crowdfunding, because, I mean, there were some tremendous games, because I'm very selective about, you know, sometimes what I talk about on my channel as a whole. And, you know, sort of like other people, I talk about stuff I think I'm going to like. Now, do I like it always as much as I think I'm going to like it? That is not always the case. But Singularity.exe, or Singularity as it goes by, crowdfunded last November. And I'm a huge fan of duelers, 1-to-1, right? Head-to-head. And I really had not seen well the incorporation of having multiple fighters going head-to-head, targeting who you want, but then also being able to rotate them in and out, sort of like your Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat tag team situation on the video game style of things. And the rotation of that with the rotation of the deck as well for these individual characters to then cycle through and maximize the timing of those aspects, it was just clever. And it didn't make me deck construct if you don't want to, which is my biggest problem with a game like these, you know, in general speak, which has prevented me from getting ashes from Plaid Hat Games for years, especially after they put out the cooperative version of that. I would love that, but I can't deck construct very well. My deck construct is like basically limited to Marvel Champions looking it up online to get other people's decks that they've pre-built already, so I don't have to do the work. But not having to do that with Singularity EXE and being different, again, in the lines of the tile laying aspects, they're different enough that I can afford to keep them. This is different enough than the other ones that I love, Exceed Battlecon, Yomi, Summoner Wars, etc., to make me feel like when this gets delivered, I'm going to love it even more. Then the other one along those lines, again, this is stuff I really loved. Old King's Crown. Old King's Crown, just, again, for a dynamic meta, bluffing, sort of very take that aggressive style game with just card driven conquest and asymmetric abilities that you're unlocking as you go along, moving through locations and trying to claim them, but simultaneously playing them down to regions on the board. It just shouldn't work. I don't always like games like this as much. You know, I'm not as big a fan now looking at and playing things like Fractured Sky at IV Studios, or even Sidereal Confluence. Like, those games just don't work well always with me. And it's tricky. It's like Area Control. I'm very picky about what continues to work well, or how that mechanism is tweaked just in the right way to make me love it. And that's a hard pill to swallow sometimes. Was it slightly over deluxified? Was it a higher price point for a small indie company? Sure. But I think, again, people are really going to be happy with this one when it delivers in 2025. And so I can see it being on people's top 10 lists right now, and I'll sort of call my shot in that regard to put that out there as a whole. Now, the other one that I'm looking at and I'm going, okay, I like this. I played this in both months, and this was Boop. And Boop. I'm a big abstract lover. I like Boop. Looking back on it now, and as my love for abstracts is, you know, sometimes a little bit clearer, getting out of that fog of cloud of love at times, it's a great game. But I don't feel like Boop adds a whole lot. Boop normally would just be fine. The extra Boop mechanic that, you know, changes in the Halloween edition, essentially, it's like a couple of the expansions that I bought over the years, and you have the expansion, but you never really fully incorporate it and utilize it. Like, it's in the game, but it's not like in the game that you're engaged with it fully. Like, sometimes you don't even realize that it was there, and you're like, oh, it would have been pretty much the same without it, and we still would have felt about the same. And that's kind of how I feel about the additional mechanic that Boop brings to Boop. right? And there's another 3D Boop Deck the Halls coming out this year. And again, just like the Azules, you know, original is sometimes best. Less is more, and it just works really well as sort of a odd abstract tic-tac-toe 3 in a row style where you have to replace your kittens with your cats and then get 3 cats in a row in order to win, while knocking off your opponents, because anytime you set one down, it knocks out somebody that's next to it, whether it's yours or someone else, unless you like double block them, and then they can't get moved. So there's a lot of strategy in an abstract style, and the cats are totally superfluous and aren't necessary, but it's like Santorini when they redid Santorini. It got a big facelift in that regard, so everybody likes it because, well, you know, cats, right? So then Kelp Shark versus Octopus. Again, I have a type, 2-player, asymmetric. I think it's still good. I think it's light enough that my wife will really enjoy it. And I don't need it to be super strategic, right? The big complaint being, oh, the shark doesn't have enough options. Sometimes, folks, people don't want all of that. You have to remember how deep you are into the hobby and how this is a broad mass appeal type game that I think they're going for down the line. And it's going to appeal as a shelf value, get into it and learn how to play it. Not as I'm looking for an Exceed Summoner Wars Yomi style of things where the meta is the meta versus the meta. And sometimes I think people lose sight of that, and they only realize it from, you know, this isn't exactly what I want out of the super deep asymmetry and 37 different tactical choices. Go buy Ironwood from Mind Clash if that's what you want. Kelp is Kelp. And so I think that one hit it out of the park. 20 strong. I've talked about this other places. It just didn't click with me whatsoever. I bought it, reviewed it, sold it. Just did not click for me in any way, shape, or form, that I was just, you know, missing something with. And I can't put my finger on it. I can't tell you what it was. I'm not going to tell you it's a bad game. I'm not going to bang on it in any way, shape, or form in that regard. But it just missed the mark for me. And I said, okay, pass. Come back with a cooperative version and I'll be all over it again. So then Tamashii, Chronicles of Ascend. Reviewed this. Awaken Realm sent it to me. And I said, okay, right? Okay. It's actually one of their most mechanically sound games, I think, with the bag building and the mechanics that they've got in terms of activating powers and traversing across the map. But it suffers, like most Awaken Realms games, in my opinion, that it's, you know, the opposite of what I just said, right? It's more for the sake of more. And some of the stuff just gets so convoluted and, you know, can't get out of its own way that it becomes difficult to just feel like you want to go back to it at times. I think, again, mechanically speaking, it just needed corners shaved off to make it more approachable. And some of these campaign games don't make all the cool stuff unlocked behind so many walls at times, right? And just give me a bullet style situation that's more easily accessible. Make a rule book that I don't need to watch 3 videos to learn how to play it in the first place. And that was super frustrating as someone who had it and goes, you know what? There is a good game in here, and it's hard for me to get to it because the rule books are written like only someone who's already played the game can interpret it. And that's one thing I've seen across the board with all of the Awaken Realms games that I've had. Good game in there, but sometimes uncovering it and how much you want to uncover it becomes the issue. So, yeah. It's not really one I feel terribly interested in going back into. I actually ended up selling it earlier this year. I think maybe 2 months ago, because I just said I'm not going to get back to it. When I have so much competing for the table space for review side of things, when I have so much coming to the table space for campaign or scenario stuff, ultimately I said I can only have so many of these. I know some of you are like, Chris, you can't have too many campaign games. Chris, you can't have too many scenario games. Chris, you're a hypocrite and you already have a bunch of them. I'm like, yes, I am. I'm allowed to not have them all though, right? I'm not one of those people who's like, well, here's my list of all 50 campaign crawlers that are the best of all time in order, ranked by the number of 30 million hours that I played. I'm not that person, folks. I'm a guy filming this after my kids go to bed between the hours of 9 and 11, right? Like, I have a very limited time frame to do this as a whole, working a full-time job and somehow managing half of this. So, comparatively, Cthulhu Death May Die, comparatively, Aeon Trespass Odyssey, right? Like, I'm going to be more selective, and for this one, for me, that's just where it ended up being. Again, not going to tell you it's bad. I'd argue that, again, it's better than most of the other Awaken Realms games out there. but again, fit as well from that aspect of things. We'll briefly talk about a couple others that I got sent. Fromage, the copy from R2Y Games, just getting delivered. People are really liking the spinning mechanism of the worker placement. I said this was one to watch out for. I said to be aware of it. And again, I think people are really going to like it. They just announced Fromagio, the expansion sequel standalone, as another twist on it of just giving you 4 different ways of incorporating the same twisting board as you play to that area and then turn the board and play to that worker placement area and turn the board. And as it goes around, it expires based on how you place your markers, and you get those resources, and then you rinse and repeat because you only have so many available to you and you're unlocking spots. And it's just clever. It's just clever. It really works. Mechanically speaking, I'd argue that it's probably their best game. I'd say it's better than Canvas. So easily better than their last one that I got a chance to talk about. I wasn't a huge fan of Globetrotting. So that one was really better than expected in that regard. Between Two Cities, the Essential Edition from Stonemaier, I like it, but it felt very mathy at the end. I like the simultaneous, play on each side and draft and pass and that style of things. But it was just too samey and a little bit too mathy at the end, if that makes sense. And a little bit, even though you had control, a little bit just out of control too. And it really only works at the higher player counts. And so was the main appeal to me. Like, I don't have a ton of games that I can play really fast, really simultaneous, really streamlined for people that aren't super deep in the hobby, like my family, who just, that's not their thing. And so having a game that plays 4 to 6 in that regard is really nice. At the same time, I also found myself not wanting to go back to it, even though it fits that niche. And so, yeah, I ended up selling it. Whoops. So, yeah, I reviewed it, was happy with it, but not ultimately happy enough to keep it. Then I'm going to talk about one that I will also talk about one other place too, but one of my favorite games, my arguably maybe favorite, but most played area control game. It's a Japanese game called Rumble Nation. You have 10 different areas on the board. You randomly place 10 different tokens on the board, allocating them from 2 to 12. And then you just kind of roll dice, and it's based off of putting cubes down in those areas. You pick 2 of the numbers to represent the area which you're putting the cubes in. The other number represents how many cubes you're going in. So like if you roll a 1 or 2, then you put in 1 cube. If you roll a 3 or 4, you put in 2 cubes in the area. Or if you roll a 5 and 6, you put 3 cubes in the area. And then you score based on who has the most in those areas, going from area 2 to 3 to 4. But if you win an area, you then get to put troops in adjacent areas that you have presence in as well. And so it sort of cascades in that way to help you win areas that are getting scored later based on early wins. And your dice roll is how you mitigate, right? Because you get the little Yahtzee situation. And it plays in, 30 to 40 minutes. My brother-in-law and sister-in-law and wife all really like it. And it's probably one of the best games I've ever bought, sight unseen, based off of one random YouTube video that was poorer quality than mine when I first got it years ago. So easily my favorite area control game, and we still play it to this date. Now, we played a bunch of kids games. I'm not going to bore you with the kids games, but if you're ever looking for kids games recommendations, as a side note in the middle of this video, shoot me a comment in the comment section down below and I'll totally hit you up. Things like Hoot Owl Hoot and Animal Upon Animal and Outfoxed are absolutely fantastic. We have Sorry at my house, folks. We play Sorry because my 4-year-old freaking loves it, and so did my 9-year-old. So again, things like that still have a place regardless, especially if you've got kids. But there actually is a really cool version of Animal Upon Animal called Balancing Bridge, which I got on eBay from Germany, which has this bridge in the middle that you actually have to, like, it moves and you have to balance stuff on it. So it's absolutely a fantastic version of that. And so we actually played that back in October as well. It's been a long time since we've played that. The only other thing I'm going to talk about or mention really quickly, Kinfire Delve, the first one, Vainglorious Grotto. Again, it was nice. It was very difficult. I don't see the reason to get one over the other. I think there's 3 iterations out now, and they all give you 2 different characters with a more solo style, deck driven customization, really option mitigation as these cards pop up and you have to deal with them and play your cards and refresh them and take damage. It's difficult. It's very much a challenge. It's a great solo game, but again, it felt more puzzly hard, a little bit tuned hard side of things for me as a bad gamer. But if you're looking for something clever, hard solo puzzle, this is fantastic. But I'm also not really interested in keeping it. I think I have 1 or 2 of them, and I think I'm more than willing to get rid of them just because it just, you know, it's not a game I'm going to play 2-player with my wife. You know, she doesn't want to, you know, analysis paralysis that much in that aspect of things. And it's just not one I'm going to play 2-handed over some of the other solo-ish games that I can, if so choosing, Dune Imperium, Spirit Island, however I want to do that, Bullet, whatever it may be, going up against the game with an Automa from that style of things. And then the last one, Garden Guests. I mean, again, just a tile laying game that we were happy with, but also unremarkable. You're just forming continuous paths across, and it's very heavy. Take that. You can trap people. You can play as multiple players. You can use cards and give cards to teammates as you're bridging these gaps in set collection style ways. But the paths are permanent, and you can basically screw people if they're not paying attention. And I don't really think it works as well at higher player counts, and at the lower player counts, you can really just have a little bit too open at the same time, if that makes sense, because how big it is. So it's one of those that I said tile laying is fine, but comparatively to all the other ones that I have out there, decision making wise, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, right? When the standard and the bar is set that high, right? I just, you know, don't see a need for some of the other ones in that aspect. Again, not a bad game, but just comparatively to what else is out there, I said nope. And so I have it for trade for sale, and would be happy to not have it anymore as well from that aspect. So there you go. Let me know what you think. Again, my thoughts a year out on my personal stuff as well. So a different spin, a different view on things, and hopefully a little bit of insight to say, does Chris really like that game when he's talking about it? Does Chris really think highly of that game? Is Chris really going to keep that in his collection later? Or is he just saying this on camera, right? So hopefully, again, transparency, #1 thing on my channel. So there you go. Stay classy. Have a great freaking day. Thanks for watching.